president of the Jesse Helms Center Foundation. His name is John Dodd. Thank you for taking some time with us here.
Oh, it is a pleasure, Patrick.
The Jesse Helms Center and the Jesse Helms Center Foundation has certainly been around for a while. However, I don't want to say that people maybe are unaware of them. I don't mean to insult you in that way, but I do think that there, as we have had more people come to this state in recent years, maybe aren't aware that the center exists. I heard an interview recently that you were on and found it fascinating. So I hope we can replicate a lot of that great information and an interesting conversation here. I think it's pretty basic to start with exactly what the center does and what the foundation does and where it's located. Well,
the foundation is located at Wingate University, although we are a separate non-for-profit. It was created when Senator Helms gave his papers to the university in 1988, and it was created to take care of the papers and for historical purposes, but the senator did not want his name used. They only agreed to do that and allow the foundation to be started if the university agreed to do programs for young people that would promote the principles and values that he stood for throughout his career.
There is a program that we're going to talk about, a high school initiative that is going on through the Helms Center now, so we'll get to that in a moment. John Dodd, president of the Jesse Helms Center Foundation, joining us here. You have quite a history with Senator Helms, dating back to 1981, and it's fair to call him the father of modern conservatism in not only in North Carolina but in the country. That's a pretty fair moniker to place upon him, is it not?
I think so. He was, he's ahead of his time in many ways. In public policy as well as politically, and he laid the groundwork for important things. Probably the most important political legacy he has was his relationship with Ronald Reagan. He was the first United States senator to endorse him, and he, along with his political machine led by Tom Ellis, is credited by saving Reagan's political career in 1976 by giving Reagan the first primary win of his presidential campaigns, and that powered him on to other wins in that primary year and then on to the 1980 nomination.
John, it's funny you mentioned that from the standpoint. I don't think, if we could visit that a little, I don't think people may understand as we look at some 30-some-odd years ago, 35 years ago, in hindsight, nearly 40 years ago now, in hindsight. But that was
it'll be the 40th anniversary next year. Yeah,
that was a big thing at the time. His endorsement and support of Reagan, was it not?
Oh, it was, because he was going against a sitting president, Gerald Ford. But the interesting thing of that is that before Ford even became president, while Nixon was still in, Jesse Helms traveled to California, had lunch with then Governor Reagan, and they had known each other through the broadcast world. And at that luncheon, Senator Helms asked him to run for president, not with the thought that Nixon would be resigning, that Ford would be in there, but with the thought that there'd be an open nomination. So he committed it to himself even before he even knew what was going to happen. He committed to Reagan, so that's how that all got started.
John, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
up to that point, in the primary season, Reagan had lost like 8 straight primaries, and there were many people calling for him to get out of the race, and that's why the North Carolina win was so critical.
We're speaking with John Dodd, who has contributed to the autobiography, Here's Where I Stand, of Senator Jesse Helms, that back, I believe, in 2005, John. Do I have that year correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and John has his own books. There's a recent book on speeches. JesseHelmsCenter.org is a good place to start to maybe look some of those up. Google Books as well. John Dodd has been good enough to join us here. You all are located in Monroe, too. You mentioned Wingate, but just to give the city.
Well, we're just outside of Monroe, about 5 miles. We're directly across the street from Wingate University.
Okay. So you linked up with Senator Helms in 1981 and were part of his campaigns. You were part of one of the most infamous and famous campaigns, not only in our state but in national history, Helms Hunt, 1984.
Yes,
it was. You mentioned Senator Helms being ahead of his time. That race, in many ways, was ahead of its time.
Oh yes, it was in many ways. I mean, we started out 17, 20 points down a year out, and were able to make a comeback and win decisively against a very popular governor. And so there was some, I can't take a lot of credit. I was just a small cog in a machine there. I've worked more in the finance end of things, and but there were some very innovative practices that were developed throughout that campaign that now they've changed much since then.
Right.
But at the time they were quite innovative.
Did he like campaigning?
Frankly, no. He liked getting out with the people and speaking and talking,
mm-hmm.
and he particularly enjoyed any kind of meeting with young people. That was one of his passions. In fact, he met with over 100,000 young people while he was in Washington. Any school group that was coming, he'd go out of his way to meet with. But no, he was not did not enjoy the political campaigning per se.
You were on the finance end. Did he like the fundraising even less?
Yes, he liked that even less.
John,
but he did enjoy the part I did, which was setting up events around the country and getting out and meeting people. He always enjoyed that. He was very much of a people person.
John Dodd from the Jesse Helms Center Foundation, the president of that group, with us here. Then there was the Harvey Gantt race, particularly 1990. There are some misconceptions, according to your group's website, about that race and some of the television ads that aired. But when you look back at that as heated as the 1984 race was, that became heated for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, it was a tough race. It was a tough election year for Republicans, and which is often forgotten. But and of course, Mr. Gantt had the mainstream press very much, pushing for him and such. But there's some misconceptions about what actually turned the tide and how Senator on that race. There's often talk about a particular campaign ad featuring, called the Hands ad,
mm-hmm.
and that was about a veto of a quota bill by George H.W. Bush,
mm-hmm.
and that was failed to be overridden in the Senate, and Gantt made an issue of that, and an ad was produced that ran very little. Really was not an important piece of the campaign. And, so there's been much made about that, but, that was Senator Helms was actually taking the same position as the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in that. And, so that ad has been, somewhat laid out as the major factor. The major factor in that campaign, the thing that really was put the stake into the Gantt campaign, the heart of the Gantt campaign, was a television ad about Harvey Gantt's benefiting on a television license deal
mm-hmm.
from a minority quota, and he utilized this. He and his group of partners utilized this law to get this television license, and then turned around and sold that at a large profit to another major non-minority company. And that was the ad that really, hurt him and ran extensively, and when as far as TV ads go. And but Senator Helms still won that race comfortably, and but that was a controversial race. But every ad that we ever ran that I was recall, and I'm sure it was an issue-based ad. It was not a personal attack in a sense. This was an issue. He utilized, Mr. Gant utilized, minority, set aside, which would have been fine because it was legal if he had operated a television station.
John, before we run out of time here, I do want to have you speak to this high school initiative called the Free Enterprise Center. Could you tell the listeners about that very quickly?
Well, one of our major missions is, as I alluded to earlier, was to work with young people. And Senator Helms wanted that from the beginning. He did not want a dusty museum, and that was one of his charges to
right.
me. And so I had always been working with entrepreneurs and such around the country in my work for the senator and other political figures. And I'd always been impressed by them. And so when he gave me that charge, when I took this position, I developed a program called the Free Enterprise Leadership Challenge, which is this year celebrating its 20th year. And we have out of over 8,300 graduates. We did it this year at Campbell University and Wingate University here in North Carolina, and at Palm Beach Atlantic in Florida. And this is a week-long training in the entrepreneurship, and where kids actually run their own companies. And these are high school students, and they also learn the founding principles of our country. And not partisan in any way, really just looks at what Senator Helms called the miracle of America, which is our free enterprise system. And we've also just started a new online program so that instead of reaching hundreds of young people each year, we can reach thousands, and that's at freeenterprisenow.org, freeenterprisenow.org, and it is a special program. And I'd urge your listeners to go on. It's very educational. It's targeted to high school students, but parts of it can be used in different components for middle school, homeschool, private, and public school. And it's developed by Dr. Peter Frank, who's the head of the business department here at the university, and he's our Jesse Helms Free Enterprise Fellow. And it is our it's kind of the latest in the what they call massive online courses that allow you to teach and reach people all over the country, in fact, all over the world.
John Dodd is with us. He's the president of the Jesse Helms Center Foundation. And whether you loved Senator Helms or hated Senator Helms, it certainly is a fascinating study. And his force in American politics and North Carolina politics cannot be denied. John, really a nice conversation. I enjoyed speaking with you, and I hope we can talk to you again real soon.
Well, would love to anytime.